13 helicopter rescues in 7 days. That was just 1 week at Grand Canyon National Park. And what makes that number so striking is not just how high it is, it's also the fact that these are just normal, everyday people on their everyday vacation, and they suddenly became a statistic. No one wakes up thinking they're going to become part of a rescue. It starts with a hike that looked manageable on a map or a quick photo stop, or the assumption that what it feels like going down the canyon will feel the same coming back up. And unfortunately, there are an average of 17 deaths inside the Grand Canyon National Park every year. Hey everyone, I'm Katie, your host of the Great Escape podcast, where we talk all things national parks and adventure. We're continuing our Grand Canyon mini series with an episode that every person planning a visit should hear. Now, when people think of Grand Canyon rescue, they typically picture a dramatic cliffside moment, someone dangling from a rock while a helicopter appears overhead. Now, that does happen sometimes, yes. Yet, a lot of rescues start in a much quieter way. They start with phrases like, "Let's go a little farther," or "I only brought one bottle of water," or "I'm in pretty good shape." Cute. The canyon loves confidence. Grand Canyon National Park sees about 4.5 million visitors every year. And while the total number of search and rescue incidents is a small fraction of that, the nature of those rescues is what actually matters. These are not just scraped knees or minor inconveniences. They often involve heat illness, dehydration, exhaustion, medical emergencies, and full evacuation operations that can require helicopters and teams working in extreme conditions. And when you see patterns across all of these incidents, you start to realize something important. Most rescues don't begin with dramatic mistakes. They begin with very normal decisions that stack up over time. The first pattern that shows up is something I call tourist brain. This is the version of your personality that only activates on vacation and suddenly starts making slightly worse decisions with confidence. Tourist brain says things like, "We made it this far, let's go a little farther." Tourist brain says, "It's probably just around the next bend." It's also the same mindset that leads people to step a little too close to edges for photos or wander just slightly off trail for a better view. There have been real incidents in the park where visitors have fallen from rim areas or steep terrain while taking pictures or exploring areas without barriers. And what makes these situations so important to understand is that they rarely feel dangerous in the moment. They feel like small, harmless decisions that didn't seem like a big deal until suddenly they were. I read online there have been 180 deadly falls at Grand Canyon National Park. The big takeaway here is to stay on the trail, mind the signs and barriers, and always be aware of your surroundings. Put the phone down as you hike. Don't take the camera out until you're stopped and stable. Now, another major category of rescues comes from unexpected emergencies. Not every situation in the canyon is caused by poor judgment. Some involve medical issues, sudden injuries, or environmental conditions that change rapidly. Flash flooding is one of the clearest examples of this. In nearby areas like Havasu Creek, sudden storm activity has triggered flash floods that have trapped hikers and required large-scale rescue operations, including helicopter evacuations. In 2024, 200 people had perfectly reasonable plans at the start of their day, only to find themselves in completely different conditions hours later and having to be rescued. This is also where a lot of visitors get surprised by how quickly the weather can shift. People think of the Grand Canyon as a hot, dry environment. Yet, monsoon season can introduce sudden storms and flooding risks that don't match what most visitors expect when they arrive. So even when decisions are solid, conditions can still change the outcome. In spring and summer, the Grand Canyon soil becomes extremely dry. If a storm rolls in and dumps rain, even miles upstream, that ground isn't able to soak up the water as easy as it is during the rainy season. So instead of the water soaking into the ground, it sits on top of the ground and then rolls downstream. Before entering any canyon or river basin, check weather reports first, including the areas upstream from where you are. Then there are the accidents that are caused by straight up poor planning. You'd be surprised how often that shows up in rescue reports. This is the category that includes starting hikes too late in the day, underestimating distances, bringing too little water, or not understanding what the descent into the canyon actually means for the return climb out. The tricky part is that poor planning rarely feels like poor planning in the moment. It feels like optimism. It feels like flexibility. It feels like we'll figure that out when we get there. We got this. Poor planning rescues became so common, the park created a preventative search and rescue team whose job is to intercept these situations before they turn into emergencies. Rangers will literally approach hikers and ask how much water they're carrying, how far they're going, and whether they understand the conditions below the rim. That exists because patterns are so consistent that prevention has become part of the system. One of the most common real world scenarios involves hikers starting down trails like Bright Angel or South Kaibab too late in the morning. They feel great on the descent and they continue farther than originally planned into the canyon. Everything feels manageable on the way down. The views are incredible, the temperature feels fine, and the energy starts out high. Then the return hike out begins, and the canyon reveals what was always coming. The afternoon heat increases, fatigue builds, and the climb takes longer and longer than expected. There are around 250 rescues per year because people underestimated hike distance, altitude, and heat. This leads directly into overconfidence. And I don't mean arrogance, it's about completely normal confidence that doesn't account for environmental intensity. People think, I work out or hike sometimes, or I'll be fine. And to be fair, in many environments, that level of fitness is enough. The Grand Canyon is different. It does not adjust itself to match your expectations. It simply operates on its own scale. Let's talk heat and dehydration. That's one of the most consistent drivers of rescues. At the South Rim, temperatures might sit around 70 to 80 degrees in the morning, which feels ideal for hiking. Yet, as you descend into the canyon, temperatures can rise significantly, often 15 to 25 degrees warmer or more, depending on conditions. A comfortable morning hike can turn into a 90 to 100 plus degree environment by midday, especially in exposed areas. What makes this especially dangerous is how gradual it feels. People start early, they feel good, they take breaks less often because momentum feels fine, and slowly their body begins operating under stress while their perception still feels normal. This is also where something counterintuitive happens. It's not just dehydration that causes problems, it's an imbalance. What I mean is drinking water alone without replacing electrolytes can lead to issues like hyponatremia, where sodium levels drop too low inside your body. So even people who are doing the right thing by drinking a lot of water can still run into trouble if their body chemistry is out of balance during prolonged exertion. And finally, everything comes back to the core pattern, underestimating the canyon itself. I can personally speak to this one because the descent feels almost deceptively easy. Gravity helps, momentum builds, and everything feels manageable on the climb down. I remember thinking, oh, this isn't nearly as hard as people say. Well, then a couple miles in, I turn around and start climbing back up, and it felt like an entirely different environment. It was hotter, it was more exhausting, and every switchback seemed to extend farther than the last. Time felt different, effort felt different. The canyon hadn't changed, yet my understanding of it had. That's really the heart of this entire episode. Most rescues are not the result of dramatic mistakes or reckless behavior. They are the result of normal people making normal decisions in an environment that quietly amplifies every small miscalculation. Now, I don't want this episode to scare anyone away from Grand Canyon National Park. It's amazing. Please go visit. It is one of the most incredible places that you can see. I'm just asking you to respect it enough to plan better, prepare better, and recognize how quickly conditions can shift once you leave the rim. If you're planning a trip, start early. Know your turnaround point before you begin. Bring more water and electrolytes than you think you will need, and understand that going down is optional and coming back up is mandatory. If you haven't listened to episode 72 on an overview of a trip to Grand Canyon National Park, go back and listen to that one because these two episodes together completely change how you see the trails and the trip itself. Nobody plans a Grand Canyon trip thinking about rescue helicopters. People plan it thinking about views, experiences, and memories. And both of those things are absolutely possible. The difference is whether you understand the canyon before you step into it or after it's already demanded your attention. Now go plan your hike, and I'll see you in the next episode.